These strange missing person cases have perplexed investigators as well as the family and friends of the missing person. Years, and in some cases decades, have passed with no explanations for what happened. Number 15. Marcus Rigby is one of about 13,000 people in Britain who've been missing for over a year. He was just 27 years old when he vanished without a trace, almost 30 years ago. Marcus grew up in Cumbria with his sisters and mother. They described him as a lovely son and a family-oriented person. He had a 6-year-old son named Daniel, though it isn't clear how involved the child was in Marcus's life. Around April of 1995, Marcus told his mother he was moving to Dorset on the south coast to get a fresh start. Reports about the disappearance described the move as sudden. There was no obvious reason why Marcus was deciding to move, or why he wanted a fresh start. He told his family that he would be in touch in the next week, but they never heard from him again. Marcus's family reported him missing not long after, and the investigation into his disappearance began. Investigators found that he had hitchhiked to a service station not far from London, where he contacted his aunt. He stayed with her for a few days before heading to Weymouth, allegedly to look for work. The last credible sighting of Marcus puts him on the Isle of Portland, which is attached to Weymouth by a thin strip of beach. About 6 months after his disappearance, he was seen at a bed and breakfast, only a short walk to the beach. Marcus wrote a check to pay for the services, but the bank refused it, and it was mailed back to Marcus's mother. One theory suggests Marcus decided to get a fresh start as an artist, or do some other work for cash. His family described him as a talented artist with a focus on charcoal drawings and clay sculptures. His family are hopeful that he did decide to just get a fresh start, cutting off contact with them for some unknown reason. But one of his sisters thinks that it would be out of character for the family-oriented man. The alternative is that Marcus met with foul play after leaving home. Alternatively, he could be suffering from memory loss after an accident of some kind. There have been some sightings over the years, often concentrated on the Weymouth area, but none of these have ever been confirmed. In January of 2024, an age progression image was released in the hopes that it could lead to more leads. Marcus is described as being 5 foot 11 inches tall, with hazel eyes and brown hair, and he would be in his 50s today. Anyone with information can contact the Missing People charity on 116000. Number 14. 66-year-old June Goodman was reported missing after she failed to show up for work at the U.S. Postal Service on March 29, 2003. She hadn't been seen since the evening before when she'd stopped in at a store to purchase some chocolate bars. 2 decades on, there still hasn't been any sign of the missing woman. When June didn't show up for work, her coworkers were worried. She was a dependable worker who wouldn't just not show up. They contacted her sister, who went to her home in Snowflake, Arizona to check up on her. June's sister found her outdoor lights still on, and the sliding glass door at the back of her house partially open. Inside, the TV was on and everything was in its proper place, but June was nowhere to be seen. June was reported as missing, and a timeline of events was pieced together. She'd gone out for dinner with a sister the night before she vanished, where the topic of conversation had been June's upcoming retirement. She was looking forward to it and was making plans for how she would spend her time. After leaving her sister, June stopped by the store to purchase candy, then returned home. The police believed she'd made it home and relaxed in her recliner in front of the TV. From there, she would have been able to see the headlights of any car coming up the quarter-mile dirt road to her home. They suspected June had seen someone pull up and had left through the sliding door to greet them. There was no sign of a struggle near June's house, so it was likely that she got into the vehicle either to just talk or to go somewhere else, but she never returned. June's case gathered a lot of attention, and thousands of leads were sent to the police. Each one was checked out, but none led anywhere. There's a reward for information in June's case, and even decades later, her family is still hopeful for answers. June is described as being 5'2", weighing 130 pounds, and had brown-gray hair and green eyes. Anyone with information should contact Snowflake Taylor Police at 928-536-7500. Number 13. When Nancy Jean McDuxton left a note telling her husband that she was going on a day trip to Davenport, California, it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. It was only when she didn't come home that people realized this was the beginning of a missing person case. Nancy was 52 years old at the time of her disappearance. She worked as a director of the local nursery school and was very dedicated to her job. On August 10, 2003, the day before her disappearance, people at the school noticed that she was energetic and seemed happy. The following day, she saw her daughter and told her about her planned trip to Davenport. It was something that she would do every so often, a way to relax and enjoy time alone. She wrote a note for her husband and then left the house at about 8:30 a.m. Throughout the day, she was spotted in Davenport, shopping and sending postcards to friends back home. Between 5:30 and 6:30 p.m., she was seen by a waitress at the new Davenport cash store and restaurant. She was dining with an unidentified man. Nancy's husband began to worry when she didn't return home that night. At 9 a.m. the following morning, she was reported missing. It wasn't long before her vehicle was found abandoned off the side of State Highway 1. The Mazda minivan was locked, and Nancy's wallet and gifts that she had purchased the previous day were located in the vehicle. The location looked worrying at first glance. The car had been abandoned near some cliffs, but this was somewhere Nancy would often come to spend time. Some of her belongings were found nearby. A blanket, folding chair, and book seemed to be set up for reading near the bluffs. Her sun hat was also nearby. An accident might have happened, but what made this case so strange was the fact that Nancy had made arrangements at work for a longer period of absence. She left instructions for administrative duties and seemed to know she would be away for a while. During the investigation, investigators found no evidence of a reason why Nancy might have wanted to disappear. She didn't have any problems, and her family didn't believe she would want to leave her young granddaughter. The person Nancy dined with the day she vanished has never been identified. The police don't believe he was involved in Nancy's disappearance, but they do want to talk to him. He was described as being in his late 40s or early 50s, and was of Asian or Polynesian descent, and stood about 5'6" tall. Nancy would be 74 years old today. She was 5'6" and weighed 125 pounds and had blonde hair and blue eyes. Anyone with information in this case should contact the Belmont Police Department at 650-595-7400. Number 12. When Sister Jacinta Bracken went missing in May of 1979, it was one of the most talked about missing person cases of the time. But as leads dried up, the case went cold and has remained that way ever since. Jacinta was originally from Ireland, but lived in Wales at the time of her disappearance. She was described as being extremely kind but shy. She liked to go on walks and taught guitar to local children. She was last seen on May 19th on a shopping trip. That morning, she had gone through her daily routine, and after lunch traveled to Swansea City Centre for a shopping trip. Jacinta wanted to buy a birthday present for her mother back in Ireland. She asked another nun if they wanted to walk into town together, but the nun said she couldn't, so Jacinta went alone. The 38-year-old was spotted by various people in the town center. The last confirmed sighting of her was by two children she taught, who spotted her near the newly constructed shopping center car park in the afternoon. Another possible sighting was at St. David's Church, where the caretaker saw someone praying. The caretaker knew Jacinta, and even though she didn't see the woman's face, believed that it was the nun who she saw that evening. When the sister didn't return home, she was reported missing to the local authorities. Jacinta often liked to walk home along the seafront, even though it wasn't a direct route. At low tide, the area was covered in mud, and the route was dotted with abandoned industrial units and building works. It was along this route that police found Jacinta's handbag, which contained a small amount of money, and the tights that she had purchased as a birthday present. There was no other sign of the missing woman. At first, it was thought that she might have decided to travel back to Ireland, but a ferry ticket was found in her room at the convent, along with her belongings. She didn't seem to have any problems in Swansea, and had told other nuns how much she liked it there. Theories included that she had decided to abandon her vows and disappear, or that she had met with foul play. But the most likely theory is that she ran into trouble walking along the seafront. The area was dangerous, with a hole in the sea wall that had a lot of suction, and rotting wood along the docks. It's possible she may have fallen into the sea wall or the water itself and couldn't get out. The case remains open, and the police have appealed for information. Anyone who can help solve this case should contact Swansea Police on 01792 456-999. Number 11. Anita Price was last seen on May 30th, 1974, when she left her home to go to work at the Flamingo Club in Benwood, West Virginia. It was only a 4-minute drive to the club, but Anita would never make it and was never seen again. It took 3 days for Anita to be reported missing. By that point, the car she was driving had already been found, stopped at the side of State Route 2. The road bypassed the street where the club is believed to have been located. Anita's wallet and purse were found in the car, and her makeup was laid out on the front passenger seat. There was no sign of a struggle at the site, and there was no explanation for why the car had been abandoned. When Anita was reported missing, her family couldn't believe that she would have voluntarily disappeared. She had 2 young children and was in a custody battle with their father over them. The family couldn't see her abandoning the children for any reason. Even though the family suspected something was wrong, the initial police investigation was only cursory. They didn't examine the car she was last seen in. With the delays in the investigation, some clues may have been lost forever. Anita's ex-husband had always told her children that she had willingly left and didn't like the children talking about her. When the children grew up and after their father passed away, they reunited with their mother's family and joined the search for answers in her missing person case. In 2009, the case was reopened when the police received an anonymous tip. It claimed that someone had taken Anita's body and she was buried beneath a telephone pole along Route 2. The area was searched, but Anita wasn't found. The tip reignited interest in the case, but no new information could be uncovered. Another tip in 2016 claimed Anita's remains were located near the Certainteed gypsum plant in Proctor, but searches of the area were delayed due to a pipe running through the area that would need to be moved. If alive, Anita would be 77 years old today. She was 6 feet tall and weighed 155 pounds, and she was last seen wearing yellow shorts and a blue shirt. Anyone with information should contact West Virginia State Police on 304-329-1101. Number 10. Over a year ago, Belgian tourist Celine Cremer's trip took a dark turn when she disappeared without a trace in Tasmania. Despite many searches at that time, no trace of the young woman was ever found. Celine had been in Australia for a while when she disappeared. She wanted to see as much of the country as possible, which included a lengthy stay in Tasmania. The 31-year-old arrived in the state sometime in late 2022 or early 2023. She planned to travel around the island, hike to the top of Mount Wellington, and travel to Victoria via ferry in June. During her trip, she kept in touch with family and friends back in Belgium and posted her travels on social media. The last time any of her friends or family heard from Celine was June 16th. It was about a week before she was due to travel to Victoria. The updates didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary, and nobody suspected anything unusual would happen. The following day, Celine was spotted in the town of Waratah, apparently traveling towards Philosopher Falls, a scenic waterfall with a hiking trail. Reports differ over whether Celine was an experienced hiker, but she had summited at Mount Wellington, so the physical activity was nothing new for the trip. When the Spirit of Tasmania ferry left the island on June 21st, Celine wasn't on board. She was then reported missing to the local police. The police located the SUV Celine had been driving near the parking lot for the Philosopher Falls Trail. That made the trail and the surrounding area the focus of search and rescue teams. The trail through the bush could be difficult to navigate at times, and wandering off the trail could easily lead to someone being lost. Rescue team members stated that even going 10 steps off the trail could make it difficult to find the path again. No trace of Celine was ever found. Strangely, her phone records showed that her cell phone was active, even up until June 20th. Details of those phone records weren't shared with the public, but it indicates that if something happened to Celine, it didn't happen quickly. The police have reported that there are no signs of foul play, but they're keeping an open mind. The more likely cause of her disappearance was getting lost in the wilderness, but for now it's impossible to say. Celine was described as having a slim build with blonde hair and brown eyes. Anyone with information in this case should contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. Number 9. Ronda Jawhari was 42 years old when she vanished without a trace from her apartment in Fenton, Michigan in 2009. She left behind all her belongings and hasn't been seen or heard from since. Ronda was part of a large, close-knit family that included a brother and 6 sisters. She lived alone, but had family members check in on her every day. She couldn't drive and relied on her family to get places, which also meant that she saw them often. The day before her disappearance, February 11th of 2009, Ronda went out to eat with her mother. They went back to her apartment where Ronda's mother left out clothes for her before leaving. At 11:30 p.m. that night, Ronda called one of her sisters, and it was the last anybody would hear from her. The following day, a ride service arrived at Ronda's apartment for a scheduled pickup, but Ronda didn't open the door. She also didn't respond to calls, which led to a relative going to check up on her in person. The clothes that were laid out were still in place. It looked as if the bed hadn't been slept in, and the coffee pot was cold. There was no sign of foul play at the apartment, and nothing but Ronda herself was missing. Ronda's family contacted the police and reported her as a missing person. Unfortunately, not many clues were found in the case. She does suffer from several disabilities, including mental health problems, but she had never gone anywhere without telling anyone before. She was very close to her family and loved her daughter, who was living with Ronda's mother at the time. Even if she'd wanted to leave, it's unlikely she would have been able to do so by herself. There was only one CCTV camera at her apartment complex, which didn't get a good look at the door to her apartment. It didn't show Ronda in the parking lot on the night of her disappearance, but it did show a dark-colored car entering and leaving during the night. Unfortunately, the quality was so bad that it was difficult to even tell the type of car. One person of interest in the case is a man Ronda was seen with in the months before her disappearance. He took her to dentist appointments, but the family did not know who he was. Ronda is described as being 5 foot 1 inches tall and weighing 100 pounds. She had brown hair and eyes and a C-section scar on her abdomen. Anyone with information on this case can contact the Fenton Police Department at 810-629-5311. Number 8. When Richard Johnson disappeared without a trace in May of 2023, the family were puzzled about what might have happened to him. Over a year on from his initial disappearance, little new information has been covered, and Richard's case remains unsolved. Richard was 63 years old at the time of his disappearance. He lived with his wife of 37 years in an apartment in Lansing, Michigan. He had Huntington's disease, and although he was able-bodied, his family don't believe he would have been capable of moving away to start a new life for himself. Even if he had been capable, his family don't believe that was something that was on Richard's mind. He'd been with his wife for 47 years, and they had known each other since they were teenagers. There was nothing in Richard's life to suggest he was unhappy or planning to get away. On May 7th, 2023, Richard went to visit a friend who lived at the nearby Plumtree Apartments. At about 11 p.m. that night, he left to walk home. The journey should have taken about 12 minutes, but Richard never made it back to his apartment. Richard's wife immediately knew something was wrong and contacted the authorities the following day. There were some delays at the beginning of the investigation, and the Johnson family began the search themselves. They searched local wooded areas and hung up missing person flyers. It was about a week before the local police posted Richard's missing person release to their social media. They appealed for information from anyone who might have seen him and looked through CCTV from the surrounding area for any sign of the missing man. The area where Richard went missing is mostly residential, although there is a more commercial area a short walk north. If he had gone that way for whatever reason, Richard likely would have appeared on the security cameras there, but none picked up anything. Search dogs and drones were used in the investigation, but none picked up anything that could lead the family to any clues. Richard remains missing, and there's been little progress in his case since the day he disappeared. Richard was last seen wearing a camouflage jacket, a gray or white shirt, gray pants, and a baseball hat. Anyone with information can contact the Eaton County Sheriff's Office at 517-543-3512. Number 7. The disappearance of Helen Brach is a mysterious case surrounded by conspiracies and members of organized crime gangs. Almost 50 years on from when she was last seen, the true story of what happened to her remains unknown. Helen was a 65-year-old widow living in Chicago in 1977. She had been married to Frank Brach, owner of the Brach Candy Company. When he passed away, she inherited his fortune, which led to the nickname the Candy Lady. Helen developed an interest in horses, encouraged by her boyfriend Richard Bailey. She began to buy and sell horses, but it was more than just a business for her. She cared about the welfare of the animals that were in her care. The last confirmed sighting of Helen was on February 17, 1977. She went to a routine health check at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. She was found to have been in good health. After finishing there, she walked back to her hotel, stopping along the way to buy cosmetics and towels at a gift shop. While there, she told the clerk that she was in a hurry because her houseman was waiting, but there was nobody at the hotel waiting for her and was traveling alone. After this, Helen's whereabouts become much more unclear. She did have a houseman, Jack Matlick, but Matlick told conflicting stories about what had happened over the following days. He claimed to have picked Helen up from the airport and drove her home. He then called his wife to say he would have to stay overnight, which was very unusual. The next morning, he drove Helen back to the airport so she could fly to Florida, where she was planning to meet Bailey. It's unclear whether Helen made the first flight, as nobody aboard remembered seeing her. The second flight was even more suspicious, as she didn't have any luggage or even a plane ticket. It took weeks before anybody reported Helen missing. After the police became involved, they found many contradictions in Matlick's story. A lie detector test came back inconclusive. While Matlick was strange, suspicion soon fell on Richard Bailey. Bailey was a con artist who preyed on middle-aged women who were recently widowed or divorced. His schemes often involved selling horses for far more than they were worth. Bailey would later confess to his cons after being caught, but denied having ever conned Helen or having anything to do with her disappearance. An investigation found that a larger criminal network might have been involved. There was a group of criminals who were using horses to commit insurance fraud. They would buy horses, insure them, and then take their lives and claim the money. It was alleged that Helen found out about this scheme, and the gang took her life to stop her from going to the police. Despite a lengthy investigation and one member of the gang confessing to taking Helen's life, the truth about what happened has never been uncovered. Number 6. On the night of February 28, 2002, Allison Romedy tucked her daughter into bed at their home in Rincon, Georgia. It was the last time anybody would see her before she vanished without a trace. The next morning, 10-year-old Mallory woke up to find her mother wasn't home. She assumed that Allison had gone to work. 3 weeks later, Allison had started working at Con & Co. in the customer service department. There had been no known problems during that time, and there doesn't appear to be anything out of the ordinary about her work. Mallory went to school like normal, but when she returned home, there was still no sign of her mother. She called Allison's work, only to find that Allison had never arrived at the office. They had no idea where she was either. Allison was reported missing that evening. There was nothing out of place at the house. Allison's phone and medication for multiple sclerosis had been left behind. The only things that investigators found missing were Allison's car and her Dale Earnhardt cab. It wasn't long before the car was located outside the Fair Oaks apartment block about a mile from her home. It looked as if it had just been parked there, and there were no clues that could explain where Allison had gone from there. From the start, the police suspected foul play. They didn't know what had happened or who might want to hurt Allison, but they didn't believe she had disappeared willingly. Allison had a boyfriend at the time of her disappearance, but very little is known about him. He refused a polygraph test and allegedly was uncooperative with the police. That doesn't necessarily mean that he had anything to do with her disappearance, and he hasn't been named as a suspect. 2 decades on from the disappearance, the police received leads that they believed would finally lead them to the person responsible for this mysterious disappearance. But unfortunately, those leads went nowhere, and the case went cold again. Today, there's a $17,500 reward leading to an arrest in this case. Allison is described as being 5'7" and weighing 120 pounds. She had brown hair and blue eyes, and was 43 years old at the time of her disappearance. Anyone with information should contact the Rincon Police Department at 912-826-5200. Number 5. On the evening of June 8, 1998, Marcus Rutledge was reported missing from his home in Nashville, Tennessee. It took a month before his car was located on the other side of town. What happened to him remains a mystery. Marcus was a senior at Tennessee State University. He lived alone but had a girlfriend and a 2-year-old daughter who he saw as often as possible. The night before he vanished, Marcus stayed with his girlfriend. The following morning, he said goodbye to her and took his daughter to daycare. Later in the day, he chatted with his girlfriend on the phone, but she couldn't be certain where he was. That afternoon, Marcus's girlfriend tried to call him again but got no response. After multiple calls went unanswered, she tried Marcus's parents to see if they knew what was going on. Marcus's family lived in Michigan, where Marcus had grown up. They hadn't heard from him either and couldn't get in touch with him when they tried. The girlfriend next tried Marcus's home, finding it locked with nobody inside. She had to break in through a window, and nothing was out of place in the home except for the fact that Marcus's dog was closed up in the bathroom. That raised some alarm bells for Marcus's family, and they contacted the police. Marcus's car was also missing. Information about Marcus and his car was broadcast on the local news, while investigators tried to figure out where he could have gone after he dropped off his daughter at daycare. Details about Marcus's whereabouts on the day of his disappearance were never uncovered, but Marcus's car was eventually found. The vehicle was located on July 1st outside the Riverwood apartments on the other side of town. There was no obvious reason why Marcus would have been in the area. If he knew anybody at the apartment complex, that information wasn't revealed to the public. Foul play was suspected in the case. It was unlike Marcus to just disappear without telling anybody. Even if he was in trouble, his family believed he would have told his sister or best friend, but nobody had any reason to suspect something like this would happen. He left behind his daughter and a son from a previous relationship. He cared a lot about both children, and his family don't think he would just abandon them. Marcus was 6 feet tall, weighed 190 pounds, and had black hair and brown eyes. He was 23 years old at the time of his disappearance. Anybody with information can contact the Nashville Police Department's Crime Stoppers at 615-742-7463. Number 4. Amber Arnett was scheduled to visit her mother in Lansing, Michigan on June 25, 2023. But on the day of the visit, there was no sign of Amber. Her mother couldn't get a hold of her. When she still hadn't heard from her daughter by July 4th, Amber was reported missing. Amber lived in the neighboring town of Leslie. She had previously worked as a live-in carer at an adult foster care home, but had been let go a few months prior. Now she was living with a friend, but had told her family she didn't feel safe where she was living. The friend last saw Amber on June 22nd. She had left to travel to see her mother, though it was only a short car journey between the two cities. Between June 22nd and June 25th, she talked with her family on social media, and nobody realized anything was wrong. After Amber was reported missing, the local police searched through CCTV footage and appealed to the public for information to try to figure out where Amber had been after she was last spotted. The last footage they could find that showed Amber was taken from a Dollar General store in Lansing on June 25th. She'd made it to the city on the day that she was supposed to be visiting, but never got from the Dollar General to her mother's house. Amber's family managed to access her social media accounts, hoping that they might uncover some clues as to where Amber might have gone after the store visit. They found that her last Facebook messages were to a friend who lived just a few blocks away from her mother. She was going to visit the friend. The last message stated that she was at the gate and needed her friend to come down to let her in. There's no information about what happened after that, or why Amber wanted to visit this specific friend in the first place. Amber's family has a reward for information leading to the case being solved, and is raising money for future search efforts. Amber was 39 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighed 150 pounds. She was last seen wearing a black tank top with white writing, blue jeans, and black tennis shoes. Anyone with information on the case should contact the Lansing Police Department at 517-483-4600. Number 3. It was 2 days before Thanksgiving of 2014 when Aaliyah Bell disappeared without a trace. 10 years on from her disappearance, her family are still searching for answers in this unsolved case. Aaliyah was just 18 years old when she vanished. She had plans to become a hairstylist when she finished school, and had been doing her younger sister's hair on the night that she vanished. After finishing her hair, Aaliyah went to visit her uncle at his home on the Chestnut Street area of Rock Hill in South Carolina. Nobody there noticed anything out of the ordinary about Aaliyah during her visit. When she left at around 11 p.m. on November 25th, it was the last time any of them would see or hear from her. Aaliyah intended to walk the short journey to her godmother's house on Confederate Avenue where she was staying, but she never made it back. By the following morning, Aaliyah's family knew something was wrong. She wasn't the type of person to just disappear without telling anybody, and they were immediately worried. Aaliyah had also left behind all of her belongings, including her cell phone and wallet. On the day of her disappearance, a family member had wired her $100, and according to family, Aaliyah was a sneakerhead, and the money was to buy a new pair of shoes. The store had even set the shoes aside for Aaliyah to come and pick them up, but she didn't even collect the money, indicating her disappearance wasn't intentional. Aaliyah's family said that she wouldn't have gotten into a car with someone she didn't know or trust without putting up a fight. There was no sign of any fight on the path between her uncle and godmother's homes, but some neighbors did report hearing screaming that night. A search of the nearby woodland and creeks turned up no sign of Aaliyah. In 2023, a new possible lead came up when it was discovered that a man named Rex Heuermann owned a property near where Aaliyah went missing. He was believed to have taken the lives of at least 3 women in New York, but no evidence connected him to Aaliyah's disappearance. Aaliyah would be 28 years old today. She was 5 foot 6 inches tall and 145 pounds when she vanished, and was last seen wearing a black peacoat, gray leggings and jogging pants, and neon blue and green shoes. Anyone with information should contact the Rock Hill Police Department at 803-329-7200. Number 2. Anthony Fahey seemed to be going through a difficult time when he left his aunt's house in Australia. He told her he was going to the bus station and would catch a bus to Melbourne or Sydney, whichever came first. The last trace of Anthony was the passenger manifest records for a bus to Sydney on July 3, 2013. His family are still waiting for him to return. Anthony was 29 years old at the time of his disappearance. He had previously worked in construction, but had lost his job the year before his disappearance. He had moved back in with his mother but was unsettled here. Anthony briefly moved to Perth with his girlfriend after she moved for work purposes, but he became even more uneasy in the city and decided to head back to his parents. In the year before he vanished, Anthony's friends and family noticed that he seemed to be more and more troubled. He was searching for answers to philosophical and religious questions about life, and had taken an interest in conspiracy theories. He was also concerned about his own drinking. His family didn't think that he drank excessively, but Anthony told them that he thought he had a problem with alcohol and was looking to go somewhere for help. All of this was on his mind when he went to visit with his aunt on July 3rd. He was particularly down, and Anthony's aunt suggested that he might find answers by joining a religious sect or going on a retreat. Anthony seemed to agree with the idea and told her of his new plan to take whatever bus he could from the station. He didn't have any luggage with him, so his aunt gave him some clothes and food and dropped him off at a bus stop so he could travel into the town center. The day before his disappearance, Anthony had withdrawn most of his money from his bank account, indicating this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision, but he hadn't spoken of any plans with anyone. Anthony was reported missing on July 15th after his family hadn't heard from him for several days. The police managed to identify the bus Anthony had caught from the station and determined that he had been aboard it when it left, but what happened after that remains a mystery. No trace of Anthony in Sydney or anywhere else has ever been found. Anthony's family are hopeful that he's still alive and may return home after getting his answers. Anyone with information on this case can contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. Number 1. When Patty Adkins left work on June 29, 2001, she was looking forward to spending a week away with her boyfriend. She had arranged for her pets to be boarded and her sister to look after her young daughter. It was only when Patty didn't pick up her daughter as planned on July 8th that anybody realized she was missing. Patty was 29 years old at the time of her disappearance and worked at the Honda plant in Marysville, Ohio. It was here that her boyfriend also worked. He worked on another line, but Patty would often come over to talk and spend time with him. Patty's boyfriend wanted to keep their relationship a secret for the time being. He was still married, but had told her he was going to leave his wife for her. He'd borrowed money from Patty so he could buy out his portion of his side business in preparation for their divorce. According to Patty, the plan was to go straight from work to their weekend getaway in Canada, where they wouldn't have to hide their relationship. A coworker had driven Patty to work so her car wouldn't be in the Honda parking lot all week. She would have to hide in the bed of her boyfriend's pickup truck as he was driving another coworker home, but after that they could start being open again. Patty was last seen leaving work. Her boyfriend left a few hours later, dropping his friend off and then apparently going straight home to spend the week with his wife and kids. When Patty's sister realized she was missing, the boyfriend was the first person she thought to check with. He denied having an affair and said he didn't know Patty all that well. The police were soon called and the boyfriend told them the same story. He allowed them to search the house, where they found gifts Patty had given to him, as well as a letter written by her confessing her love and talking about how much she wanted to be with him. There was no DNA evidence found in the vehicle itself, but part of the pullover cover was missing. When this was located, investigators found a hair belonging to Patty's cat attached to the cover. Foul play is suspected in this case. The boyfriend remains a suspect, but the police are still looking for evidence to explain what happened to the missing mother. Patty is described as being 5 foot 8 inches tall and weighing 120 pounds. She has pierced ears, a pierced belly button, and a tattoo of blue-green flowers on her lower back. Anyone with information in this case can contact Lieutenant Jeff Steers at 937-645-4126. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.